Shalom. We are on our fourth segment. This is a Parshat Vayeirah in the book of Genesis, in the book of Bereshit. And we are continuing with the story of Abraham. Well, before that, they say that once a person came to a doctor, and the doctor gave him only a few months to live. We should know about this. So, a few months passed, but what happened is the patient, he didn't pay his bill. So, when he went to the doctor, and he says he can't afford to pay his bill, so the doctor says, well, I'll give you another 6 months. Happens to be, we are all finding ourselves, some of us, struggling to find what's the right healthcare to do, but we won't go into it. But the lesson to take out from this is connected a little bit with the Parsha, but the Parshat's Vayeirah, as soon we're going to see. So there's a verse in the Parsha that says as follows. This is about Abraham. That Abraham planted an orchard in Beersheba. This is after the story with Avimelech, and he made a peace treaty with Avimelech. So then the verse comes and it says, this is in chapter 21, verse 33, the verse says, Vayita Eshel Beersheba, Vayikra Sham B'Shem Hashem Kel Olam. Avram planted an orchard in Beersheba, and he proclaimed the name of God. Our sages tell us, what is this planting of an orchard? So they tell us as follows, that Abraham planted in the desert, this is in the Negev, in Israel. So he planted an inn that had 4 doors from all sides, east, west, south, north. So for all those that are walking in the desert and are hungry, don't have where to stay, so here there was a place for them that they could stop. So if we could say this was like the first rest area mentioned in the Torah. So here, and the Medrash tells us that when people were traveling and they see this inn, they come in, Avram would offer them a meal. And we could only imagine when, this was talking about the patriarch Abraham, when he would offer them a meal, he would also spend time with them. So he would sit down and talk to them, and we could only imagine Abraham's favorite topic was God. So here this traveler that's very tired comes in and has a meal, and Abraham speaks to him about, as I mentioned, the favorite topic, to believe in God, to love God. When the meal was over, they tell us in the Medrash, so the guest or the traveler would turn to Abraham and he would say, thank you, Abraham, for such a beautiful meal and everything that you have done. At this point, Abraham will turn to the guest and he would tell him, don't thank me. You need to thank God. So the Medrash tells us that 99% of the time, people would say, okay, even though they were not great believers, we all know Abraham introduced the idea of believing in one God. So not everyone was buying it so fast. But these travelers, they spent time with Abraham and they saw his kindness and they saw everything that he has done for them. So when he asked them to bless God, grace after meal, no problem. They did that. But there was a certain percentage, the 1% there that stubbornly said, no way, I will not do that. the Medrash. That's the explanation of the Torah. One of the explanations of the Torah goes and says something very interesting. So Abraham says, okay, you don't want to bless God? Okay, wait, I'll be right back. And Abraham would come back with a bill. He says, you ate. What do you think? It's easy to have food here in the desert. The cost of delivery and shopping away. As we all know, when you stop in the airport, you buy a bottle of water, it almost costs double the price than a bottle of water in the regular mom and pop store. So the same thing here, this is what the Medrash tells us. This is what Abraham did. Most of these people said, what? You charging me? So Abraham says, yeah, there's a way out. Just say grace after meal. Say your blessing, thank God, and that's it. You won't have to pay. Pay or bless. And most of the cases, people thought about it. Economics always played a very important role, and they said, we'll pay. But there was some that were quite stubborn, and they had to find the change, or if existed, a credit card in those days, to come up with it. That is the story that our sages tell us. The question that exists is, what was Abraham trying to accomplish here? First of all, it's a little bit hard to understand that this is exactly what Abraham did. Is this a coercion? Is he trying to force people into his beliefs? We know that Abraham was a very nice fellow, and he would do everything in a very kind way, known as a very kind person. So what is this all about, that all of a sudden here seems like he was forcing people into believing? And the question exists also, so let's say if an individual did do that, so what happens when they walk out of that inn? Do they say to themselves, okay, I am a new believer? Or they say to themselves, fool Abraham, I just needed to pay, I didn't want to pay for the meal. Did that have any effect on their belief? So really, what was Abraham's thinking or his strategy for doing this? To understand this, we have to bring in another story. So there's a story with the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe. As you all know, I represent the Chabad Lubavitch movement, and the Chabad Lubavitch movement has begun many, many years ago by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe in Russia. And since then, there has been 7 leaders, till the one that had sent us here to Vermont, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson of blessed memory. So the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, known as the Rebbe Rashab. Rashab is an acronym for Rabbi Shalom Ber, but we will call him the Rebbe Rashab, so it'll be easier to remember. When he just became Rebbe, he was a young, we're talking about late 1800s. And as you know, the relationship between Hasidim, disciples, with their teacher, with the Rebbe, that you come and you ask for a blessing. You have a business that's not going well, so you come to ask for a blessing. Don't have children, you ask the Rebbe for a blessing. The idea was for somebody that has maybe better connections with the one above to plead on your behalf, to ask God for what we need. So the story goes with this individual that came to the Rebbe Rashab, and he was asking for something. The story doesn't say exactly what, but it was something that he was in a desperate need. And the story goes that the Rebbe Rashab looked at him, and he told him something very unusual. And he says, I'm sorry, I can't help you. So the Chassid, the disciple, story goes, walked out of the room, went into the synagogue and just sat down on one of the chairs and crying. He was very broken, but the Rebbe couldn't help him. The Rebbe had an older brother that passed by, and he saw what's happening. So when I looked that this person is crying, went over to him and says, "What's the matter?" He says, "Well, I just went in to ask something from your brother," and he said, "I can help you." So the older brother, goes into the Rebbe Rashab and it says, "My dear brother, what's going on? You have this person crying." So the Rebbe says, "He's crying?" He said, "Yeah, tell him to come in." So he came in, and the story goes, he blessed him for whatever he needed, gave him a blessing, and he left the room, and eventually everything worked out. So the question that's being asked, even though it's a story, and many times we're told not to question stories, but a little bit to understand the wisdom of the Rebbe Rashab, that also known if you're a Rebbe, you want to help people. What is this thing? I can't help you, where by the end you are going to help. So what exactly has happened here? So the first thing is, because this will help us to understand the story of Abraham and this story too, the first thing is we need to understand the whole idea of a blessing. What's the idea of a blessing? What's the idea when you go and you ask a sage for a blessing? So they explain us as follows, that we are told God has allocated to each one of us everything that we deserve. So in other words, each one of us is already decided from above what we're going to get. The only problem could be sometimes that the channels from above getting it to us is blocked. There is some kind of a blockage. And therefore, the blockage needs to be removed. A simple example to that will be, for example, you have money in your account. So we're not talking when you don't have money, you have money in your account, and you're traveling, and you're stopping at an ATM machine to take out money from your account. You take out your card, you have your card, you put in your card, but guess what? You don't remember the number. You don't remember the PIN number. And you're standing there like a fool, punching all kinds of numbers, and nothing is working. Now the situation is here, it's not that there's no money in the account. There's money in the account, but there's a blockage. You don't remember the PIN number. The minute you're going to remember the PIN number, then you'll be able to take out as much you're allowed to take out, whatever the limit is. The same thing is in a way in our relationship with God. God has allocated to us, and we have in our channels directed to each one of us what we're going to receive. However, sometimes we don't remember the PIN number. We don't remember how to take out that cash. So therefore, sometimes we need to have someone praying for us to take away that blockage. That is what the idea of a blessing is. The idea of a blessing is that things that we are already given by God, but for some kind of a reason, we haven't received it. So that's the idea of a blessing. So that is one thing. Now comes another part to it. I have successfully removed the blockage. But here comes another problem. The other problem is that in order to receive the blessing properly, it is explained in Judaism, in our Jewish sources, and especially in Kabbalah, that we need to be a receptacle. We have to be like a vessel that receives. So in other words, even though the blockage was removed, we have to be ready to receive the blessing that's coming to us. What does that mean? That if, for example, the cup is full, then there's no room anymore for anything to come in. So we needs to be an empty cup. What that means, we need to be humble. We need to be humble, and when we are humble, then we could receive God's blessing. But if we are full of ourselves, then why should God's blessings come in? It has no room to come in. It's full of ourselves. In other words, we need to reduce the ego that we have. And I once saw something very interesting, that the word ego in English is an abbreviation, edging God out. So we need to remove the ego. And that's a problem that we all understand, and we all know exactly what that means. So we need to work on ourselves to be humble. Now, if we go now to the story of the Rebbe Rashab, we will understand it. When this individual came into the Rebbe Rashab and asked for a blessing for whatever problem it may be, the Rebbe Rashab saw, yes, I will help him by taking away the blockage. Problem number one, I see there's a blockage, so I will do my part to do the blessing to take away the blockage. However, I see this individual, he is full of himself. So therefore, the Rebbe Rashab taught of what we call reverse psychology. He turned to that individual and he told him, I can't help you. That shook the person. And when he walked out of there, he sat down and cried with a broken heart. When the brother reported to the Rebbe Rashab, that person is crying, the Rebbe says, call him back in. Now he's ready to get the blessing. So that is a very important part of what happened in the story with the Rebbe Rashab. Now, we could a little bit understand about what happened with Abraham. Abraham wants to influence people that what they should believe in one God. So most of the people, it was working. For those that were not working, he needed a little bit to shock them. He needed them a little bit that they should feel shaken, and then all of a sudden they should start thinking, hey, wait a second, what God? When God? What's going on here? So therefore, the only device that Abraham had is, you know how you get to a person? Maybe through the pocket. The government knows how to do that, so why not Abraham? But he did it in a very smart way. He did not mean to go after their money. He just wanted them to start thinking. So then he says, you ate. Food doesn't come for free. So in other words, by saying that to them, they woke up a little bit to start thinking about what's going on. So that is, in a deeper sense, about what's going on with Abraham. Now, it's important to remember about what's going on. A lot of times, we have these two options: to be humble, or unfortunately, to be humiliated. When the outcome is the same, but there's a big difference. Being humble means you thought about it, and you yourself came up with the idea, you realize what's wrong, so you're fixing yourself the problem. In other words, when the person himself realizes, I got a little bit of ego and I need to work on it. But sometimes, unfortunately, people don't hear. And they're not ready to work on themselves. So sometimes it has to come the other way around, that they need to be humiliated, and then all of a sudden they wake up. Another interesting example that sometimes we see this happens to us. I would say it's probably not often, but sometimes it could happen that imagine you're in the supermarket, you filled up your cart, quite a lot of food, it's full, you come to the counter, everything was scanned, and you're ready to pay. You put your credit card, and guess what? It's declined. I would say that sometimes it could happen, such a thing. And now you turn around, you see there's a line of people waiting. This is called being humiliated. That moment is a moment that you don't want to happen to you. And sometimes it could be a mistake. Credit cards maybe sometimes make mistakes. However, I'm just trying to give an example how sometimes something happens to the individual. This is not what you thought. This is not what you wanted should happen. It happened to you, and all of a sudden you're humiliated. You're better off that we become humble on our own and not to be, it should happen by others. So Abraham was kind of hoping that the people should on themselves, after having a nice conversation and a good meal, that they should understand what he's talking to them about God. If it wasn't working, then he had to come with a very nice bill. But the point of that was to get them thinking. And this is what the important point is. So for sure, as we're going to move on to another point in this Parsha, the idea of that is not, God forbid, to wait to be ashamed and humiliated by others, but for ourselves to realize that if we want the blessing of God, there's two important points. One is we have to remove the stumbling block, and the other thing is we need to work on our ego in these areas where maybe we're edging God out. We want to do the other way, is bring God in. There's a famous saying, there was a great Hasidic master by the name of the Kotzker Rabbi. And he said as follows: everyone asked the question, where is God? And always everyone's answer, everywhere. There is no place where there is no God. So you will ask any kid that is studying in a, let's say, in a religious school. In our case, we would say in a Jewish school, and you ask them, and he asks the kid, where is God? He'll tell you everywhere. They even have a song, up, down, down, all around. The Kotzker would add on, he would say a little different. Where is God? Where you let him in. Because a lot of times, God is all over, but that God should be in a revealed way, we need to open the door. We need to be a vessel, an empty vessel, to be able to receive that. And that was the life of Abraham. Abraham was that way. So therefore we find, when we go in our Parsha, and we see the other story with Abraham, God describes him something very important. And he says as follows: because I know, and I'm going to read here, this is in chapter 18, verse 19, it says like this: because I have known that he commands his children and his household after him. To what? To keep the way of God.
acting with charity and justice. He instructs them to do so in order that God will bring upon Avram everything that he has said. This is a very important point. Another quick point to learn from here, that Abraham, everything that he knew was very important to give it over to the children. And that's the idea from all these things that we have mentioned today. We work on ourselves, but the idea is not just ourselves. We want to be a role model. We want to be an example for others. And when we do that, God should help us, that we should be successful in our everyday by day lives, and not to hear from the doctor that we only have another half a year, another year. We have plenty of years, and we all married very soon, the ultimate redemption. Thank you.